Hey everybody, hope all is well today. All right, now today we're going to go over a regulation and it's very important to the industry, and it is infection control. Now, we're going to briefly talk. It's going to be a multiple part, and the reason why I want to go over this is simply because this is very important to the health of you working in this field, beauty. If you're working as a cosmetologist, even if you're doing someone else's hair, or you are mainly we're doing this for the professionals. Now, the health, it's a healthy business in the beauty industry, infection control, healthy business in the beauty industry. And this is so important because you're coming in contact with others. You don't know what's out there. You don't know what they're carrying, bacteria wise, infections wise. So you need to learn what exactly, why is it so important to keep our hands washed? Why is it so important to make sure that we clean our implements and we wash them and we keep them clean after each use? This should be common practice, but a lot of things are not common practice or no common knowledge. But we want to change that. We don't want that to be such and such. So even this information will help you when you're passing your state board. And a lot of this information is required knowledge, and a lot of questions on passing your written part of your state board exam. Even state board examiners is going to be watching you just how you mock practice some of these services that comes along with having important hygiene and perfect, infection control. They're going to be watching you how you hold your implements, using them, just using your doing the mock, sanitation. If you drop a comb on the floor, what do you do? Or you drop an instrument on the floor, what do you do? How you clean your product. Even a lot of times, I know a lot of you may not think about this, but each time you use your sprays or your bottles, keep them wiped down, keep them sprayed, using clean towels at all times. If a towel drop on the floor, don't pick it up, and things like that. Just go ahead and discard it in the soil receptor and then use something clean. So all of this is very important, and we're going to definitely get into it and talk about it right now. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the next slide now. Infectious control. Now, what it involves, it involves implementing stringent hygiene and safety protocols to prevent the spread of infections among clients and professionals. Now, that is very important because you can get a lawsuit, you can get into serious trouble as a professional if you're not taking these practices seriously. I remember when I was working in a salon, I won't call the name, but I was working in a corporate salon, and one day someone came in, the lady came in with head lice in her hair. She was in a personal adult daycare kind of facility or something like that. Um, but I know she had a head full of lice that day. I sat down and I did her consultation. I sat down and did her head consultation. I set her down, and as I was parting her hair, lices were coming out of her hair. Yes, they were. And I immediately, the combs that I had, I didn't wash them or clean them. I'm gonna be honest with you. I threw them in the trash. Yes, I did. Okay. But I mean, I just didn't want to use them anymore because I'm very cautious about this health thing and the sanitation. So you want to be very, very mindful of that. Now, we also have some governing bodies that's going to make sure that we abide by these rules and these regulations, and that's a great thing because a lot of times some things has to be enforced in order for us to protect the public, and we want to do that as well. Now, one of the federal agencies is going to be OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. And the reason why that exists is OSHA exists to help us. It creates it was created as a part of the Department of Labor to regulate and enforce safety and health standards to protect the employees in the workplace, right? It says, and it also is a it's a hazard communication act, which requires that chemicals manufactured and you know imp- and importers assets the hazards associated with their products through the through the you will talk about that in a minute, the material safety data sheets. And so that's very important because these hazardous products and things that we use even in our industry, the beauty industry, is very important because they have toxic chemicals in them, and we want to make sure that they're regulated so we can be okay and safe. But now they're saying that a lot of things is going on with the relaxers. They're causing different things, and finding out that a lot of women have, it's just not been good for their overall health in the skin, and saying that, the chemicals in it was certain chemicals, it was too harsh and things like that. But there are some certain countries that ban these things. So, we want to make sure that we are following the rules. Okay. Important to cosmetology. Okay, and also the OSHA is important to cosmetology because of the nature of the chemical use, like I just mentioned, mixing, storing, disposing, general safety, and our right to know what we are working with. So that's very important for us to protect ourselves. That's why when we're doing relaxers or chemical services or hair coloring and things like that, not only to protect us from the coloring getting on us, we're protecting ourselves from the hazardous and the chemical mixtures that we don't want to absorb in our skin. That's the bottom line. Okay. All right. Next thing is going to be, we're going to talk about here it is, the material safety data sheet. And it is very important that we know, and I don't know why my little thing is like this, and so y'all forgive me. It is all over the place here. Okay, let's go back. Okay, now it is details a chemical sheet for standard for handling storage and emergency procedures, ensuring workplace safety and compliance. Now that's what the MS, that's what the data sheet is for. The material safety data sheet is for, and it's required by both state and federal law. So they require this. This is not an option. This is a requirement, which is good. So we can know that we have some regulation. And like I said, some countries won't even allow you to use certain things. They have banned it from their country. So this is kind of like the same kind of implementation that we have, in a sense that we did with certain things. We're not banning, but we're keeping a close eye on them as as a country, or as a as a state or whatever. As a country. Okay, and then also it says include information about hazardous ingredients, safe use and handling procedures, precautions to reduce the risk of harm and overexposures, flammability and data in case of fire, proper disposal guidelines, and medical information should anyone have a reaction to the product. Okay, and it can be sent to a doctor when necessary to treat a reaction from exposure. So sometimes, if something has happened, you've been exposed to it, and then, you may have to, a reaction that you may have to go to a doctor. The doctor will have that information without having to go and research it himself, to make sure that you are, that he can treat you and he know the proper thing to do for you. Now, and it says also required to be made available in the salon. So this is a requirement. You got to have these. If you're out here in the beauty world and you have a salon, you definitely want to make sure that you have a hold of these sheets at all times, and whatever, put them in a binder or folder or whatever the case may be. But you need those. These is a requirement for all products in the salon. You don't need to just put them in there. You need to properly read them and see what's going on. That's once you get into the world of of a salon ownership, or whatever kind of business you're gonna have. Okay, now it also, and if you don't have one of these sheets, it always is constitute a health risk. So you want to make sure that you have one of these in your salon. Okay, and then the next thing we're going to talk about is the EPA. And the EPA is definitely one of the agencies too that we need to learn about as a cosmetology, as a profession. You need to know which one of these on your state board exam. They're probably going to ask you which one of these are which. You need to know the difference. I would recommend you knowing the difference of them and what they are doing, what they're for. And this will be part of your, in case they ask you some questions relating to each one of those, you want to definitely make sure that you know what you're talking about. And this is not hard, but we're going to go over some of the things too. So always keep that in mind. If you're in school, if you're somebody that has to go to the state board that's listening to this, and then also if you're out here in the profession already, you still would need to learn a little bit more about this. And this is a U.S. government agency responsible for protecting human, enforcing regulations, conducting research, and promoting population and conserve natural resources. So with that being said, that the environment is licensed, license it licensed, one of them is like the hospital and the tuberculosis. Let me explain. There are two types that we use in a salon. The safety for cleaning blood is safe in hospitals. So that's some of the solution that we can have. Tuberculosis side for us, it's like, this is something that is found proved to kill the bacteria that causes tuberculosis, which are to kill. And it says, now these are this is the hospital and the tuberculosis. Those two things are the ones. One is safe for cleaning blood. That's the hospital type, and then the tuberculosis it proven to kill the bacteria that causes tuberculosis. Difficult to kill. So to avoid these, if they, you need to make sure that you have the equipment that is specially needed in order to be able to dispose of this. Now, it is against federal law to use any disinfecting product. So you have to make sure that you're using the products and according to how we are supposed to be using them. I said these are very important things, very important. Okay, now we're going to talk about the state and regular state agencies. They exist safety and welfare, which receive in the salon, and it also includes licensing agencies, state, while we have it, commissions and health departments. It requires salon staff to follow specific procedures. These are the board has a checklist, and this is why state board can come have a salon and make sure that you are following these guidelines, because so you want to make sure that you are following these regulations. So now let's talk about a little bit. If you don't, you're going to have penalties, and then it may impose regulations. And sometimes if you keep having them, you can be, and then it can also lead to suspension, revocation of your license. So you don't want that to happen. So you want rules, because they are for the safety of clients. Now laws in this aspect is written by the scope and determine the scope of practice and establish guidelines to make rules. Okay, now, so whatever is law is legislation, and that's why a lot of times you will see cosmetology in the beauty industry, they are up on top of these, and it goes into effect and goes into law. So we got to wait and we got to fight against that. So we want as much as possible, and there's been talk certain want to get away with the licensing requirement for this industry, unessential industry, but no, that's not true. It is very industry. We need this industry in more ways than one to be protected by laws. And so it is also called, laws are also called statutes. That's also mean, and then also let's talk about the rules. Let's see here. All right, this one is rules or regulations, and it says are detailed guidelines created by a regulatory agency that, let's see here. Let me see. Okay, guidelines created by regulatory agencies or board that define how a law will be implemented. They establish precise standards of conduct and can be modified or updated as needed. So that way, rules and regulations, they can be detailed guidelines created by a regulatory agency or board that define how a law will be implemented. They establish precise standards of conduct and can be modified or updated as needed. So you want to make sure that we are going by the rules. They can be modified, they can be updated. So we always need to know what's going on in our industry. And you can find that with any state that you have cosmetology license in. Go to your Secretary of State and they will have that information for you. No doubt they will have it just black and white. They will have it right there for you to see it. So, that way, and then that way you will know a little bit more about it. And now we're just going to go and get into a couple of more things that's going to be very important, and that's the principles of infections. Now, the principle in infections here is we're going to talk about there are three types of infections, microorganisms relevant to cosmetology: bacteria, fungi, and viruses, right? So each one of those represents something, and each one of those we need to learn more about so that we can be protected. Okay. Now, disinfectants must be, like I said, those are the three types: the bacteria, the fungus, and the viruses. Disinfectants must be bactericidal, fungicidal, and virucidal, meaning they will kill bacteria, fungus, and viruses. And that's why we use the barbicide, or we use the sprays when you're cleaning clippers, and when you're doing, the barbers use a clipper, cleaning clippers and things like that, so we want to make sure that we're keeping those instruments clean. And this is what we're talking about: principles of infection control, and bacteria. So we're talking about a few of these now. And then also the disinfectant that must be, used, like I said, it just, you got to kill the virus. You basically do. Now let's talk a little bit about bacteria. It's a one-cell microorganism with both plant and animal characteristics. It can exist almost anywhere, and it only can be seen under a microscope. And that is so important to know, because wow, you mean to tell me that there's some bacteria that we can't even see with the naked eye? Yes, and that is not good. And that's why we want to use every precaution to make sure that we don't do, that we don't do it. We minimize the bacteria infection. So we want to make sure that we do that. So now the types of bacteria is non-pathogenic and pathogenic, right? And so with these two, you want to know more about, with this being said, we don't know that the non-pathogenic is helpful or harmless bacteria that perform useful functions such as breaking down foods, protecting against infections, and stimulating the immune system. Now, pathogenic is harmful and disease producing when they invade the body. So you want to make sure that you don't allow bacteria. In other words, what you're seeing here, some of it is not, it's not, harmful in a sense, but then some of it, when it invades the body, it is disease prone. Okay. So you want to make sure that you are up on top of that, and making sure that you're not, you're not experiencing that at all. So let's see, let me get back to this here. Okay. So with that being said, and that's going to be all that we'll be talking about on these slides. So let me remove this slide and get myself back up into the screen here. And so now that's just the basic that we're going to talk about today about it. I want to break that down a little bit for you. But however, in the next video, we'll be talking more about this infection control. And this is a big part of your cosmetology exam. You're talking about it more, learning about more about the whole spectrum of you having your you're having learning more about the infection diseases and control, and all of this stuff that we need to know. It's boring information, but if you learn more about it, you're going to be on top in the beauty industry, because a lot of your clients will look at how you keep things clean, and you never know who might get sick. So you definitely don't want anybody coming behind you suing you. And this is why you got to know this stuff, so where you can protect your business, you can protect yourself, you can protect your wealth, your livelihood, and whatever comes next with that. But you don't want to be in a position that you are not going to be protected in this area of your business. So you need to learn this information if you don't already know it. And then also, if you are taking your state boards exams, a lot of this information about infections and disease control, pretty much that information, infection and sanitation is very important, and you definitely gonna have to know a little bit more about it. Okay. All righty. So anyway, I thank you so much, and I'm glad that you're here. Thanks for joining, and we'll see you in the next video.